What are the American people's thoughts on the recent news in Afghanistan? It's pretty depressing. Very. I feel bad for their civilians and for any US vet whose sacrifices meant basically nothing. It's also mind-boggling how much money was thrown into this war and it literally didn't matter. What was the point? The US got a $2 trillion trophy kill? There's some frickery going on here. It's Vietnam all over again. High time US reevaluates its foreign policy about invasions. Veteran here. We spent way more money and blood over the last 20 years than 9/11. I am upset that it was all for naught. But I am not ready to invest another 20 years occupying Afghanistan, or anywhere. It sucks for anyone who is left behind. But that will be the case whenever we leave. I spent all of 2012 in Afghanistan with the army. Even back then everyone's attitude seemed to be that the Kabul government was going to be toast once we left. It's one of those things where it sucks hardcore to be watching it right now. And I genuinely feel terrible for a lot of the locals I knew at the time. But I don't think there is any scenario where it ends differently. This would have played out whether we left in 2002 or 2055. Everything else being the same. Might as well stop wasting blood and treasure on it. It was definitely a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of decision. That's why I think the politicians drug their feet for so long ending it. They knew it was going to be a shoot show when we drew out. But like you said, what can we do? Just stay another 20 years to get the same result? If 20 years and billions in training and equipment melted down in 3 weeks, then I don't think any amount of resources were gonna make a difference. Trillions, not billions. Our plan, if we even had one, was never going to work. You can't invade a country and successfully establish a democracy if a significant amount of people don't want it unless you were to flat out take over and impose your new culture like an empire would. It's like we learned nothing from the Vietnam War. I feel bad for the people of Afghanistan. That being said, I am against this war and American intervention in the Middle East. We should have never gotten involved and it took 20 years. Trillions of taxpayer dollars. 20,000 wounded and 400 dead men and women to figure out that Afghanistan didn't want the government we propped up for it. I too find the 20-year war in Afghanistan a huge waste in human lives and capital. But my big fear at the US leaving is a Taliban-run Afghanistan will turn into a hotbed of terrorist activity which can lead to another massive attack on the US or its allies that will cause the US to have to intervene again. Starting this whole awful process again. While it can definitely be argued that it was very long drawn out, I just can't agree with the sentiment when people say we should have never gotten involved. We went in because the Taliban was allowing Al-Qaeda to plot 9/11. That's a pretty damn good reason to initially go in. Embarrassment and anger. That's the vibe in DC right now. The actions of the administration are not helping either. I voted for Biden, but the way his people have handled the public messaging here is atrocious. Nothing about Afghanistan. No statement. Nothing. So weird that when it's easy political points like talking about BLM or vaccines she charges forward with multiple tweets and public messages daily, but goes completely mum when a difficult subject comes up. The press secretary Jen Psaki is apparently on vacation right now. It looks terrifying. The desperation from people trying to get to the airport and board planes says as much. And what can our country do about it? Should we continue to prop up the government in an effort to prevent some terrorist foothold and protect Afghani citizens? At this point it would turn the city into an active war zone. Are there even enough people in Afghanistan who want that? Do we evacuate and leave the country entirely? America spent 20 years there. We spent trillions of dollars. We spent thousands of lives. And it seems that the country is rapidly returning to the same place as it was at the turn of the millennia. It will fall apart now or 20 years from now when the US goes bankrupt. Might as well back out sooner rather than later and save US lives and treasure. 20 years propping them up. And they couldn't hold it together for 2 weeks. SMDH. To be honest, I have a lot of feelings that I can't quite describe. There it is again. That funny feeling. It's tragic but at this point unavoidable. We couldn't stay there forever and the Afghan government and army are too incompetent and corrupt to function in any meaningful capacity. I'm in this boat but open to learning. It's like damned if you do and damned if you don't. When we were there, people cried out about giving them autonomy and inserting ourselves into something we shouldn't have. Now that we are leaving, it's that we are abandoning them and letting Taliban take control. Afghanistan is not the beginning nor the end. It has been an unstable region for decades. We have to figure out at what point do we try to mitigate the damage and not allow increasingly dangerous people weapons threaten the world as a whole. Obviously it is very sad and I feel horrible for the people that are caught in the exchange. Nobody should have to live in fear every second of every day and not have the freedom to live their own life. Sucks for the civilians there, but I'm glad we're gone. Well, now we aren't there, and Afghan is left to its own devices. Shooty thing to say, but it's not really our problem. I think Biden summed it up pretty good in his statement. We gave their military 2 decades of training, funding, and equipment, and they let their country fall immediately. If they don't wanna fight for their country, then why the hell should we? Yes, the existence of horrific events within a country doesn't automatically mean the US should invade. No one is asking us to go invade North Korea or stop the genocide. At this point the best we can do is donate time, money, items to refugee supporting institutions in our area. Where it could be America's problem is if the country become another major terrorist threat, with a new 9/11. That's my big fear about it, although at this point it might just be an irrational fear. It's the modern day Vietnam. Shouldn't have been there to begin with. Shouldn't have stayed as long as we did. Let other countries deal with their own issues and boycott, isolate the country's access to world organizations. North Korea has more or less been isolated for decades and their government is horrible to the people and they're essentially not a threat. Why couldn't the world do the same with a Taliban-led Afghanistan? They're essentially not a threat. Why couldn't the world do the same with a Taliban-led Afghanistan? Afghanistan was a threat though. Or at least they were knowingly harboring a legitimate threat. Not saying I agree with the war, but we couldn't just do nothing after 9/11 either. Shouldn't have been there to begin with. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you, but please walk us through what the appropriate reaction should have been to 9/11 then. Actual practical steps. Please. I am pissed there was no mass civilian evacuation efforts. We messed up, but at least try to do a final act of good. If we're honest, it was the big test for the ANA and the government of Afghanistan. It's their failure, not ours. Sink or swim, MF. We don't even keep our kids at home forever. And we love them. I'm disgusted. We pour an absurd amount of money into the military. Our taxes don't pay for healthcare. Our infrastructure is degrading. And our funding for green energy initiatives is pitiful. But you can be damn sure that our military spending is always a top priority. And we say we want to provide aid to other countries, to fight injustice and help other countries be free. So what the frick did we accomplish over there after pumping trillions of dollars into this war? It angers me so much that America repeatedly sticks its nose and money everywhere, but what about Americans? What about our education, healthcare, retirement? My god, imagine where we would be if those trillions were spent bettering our nation than this giant politician DCK measuring contest. We spent all that money to basically prop up a leaning tower with a 2x4. It was going to happen regardless. We just wasted money and lives on it. We needed to leave years ago. Actually, we were never going to change things. But my heart hurts for all those innocent people who really wanted it to work. 1. Why was the US military the only thing keeping Afghanistan together? What was the plan? We can't stay there forever. 2nd. Joe should have listened to his top military officials who said to at least keep 4,000 troops to prevent this from happening. He was so confident everything would be okay, but for no reason. Lastly, I hope no other terrorist group shows up. The news program I watched last night said that when we left Al-Qaeda, ISIS showed up right behind them. 1. Why was the US military the only thing keeping Afghanistan together? Because the Afghan army is stunningly corrupt and mind-blowingly useless. 2nd. Joe should have listened to his top military officials who said to at least keep 4,000 troops to prevent this from happening. We can't stay there forever. And I highly doubt the number of troops needed to keep that failed state from imploding would remain at only 4,000. There never was a plan beyond killing Osama bin Laden. And it turns out he was in a compound just miles away from Pakistan's military academy. So much money was poured in and wasted by the incompetence of the US military and lack of care toward the corruption of the installed Afghan government. Mine is damn Maybe we weren't just bullying them the whole time. Bullying whom? My thoughts? I'll never forgive Florida for giving us George W. Bush. You misspelled the Supreme Court. I just got back from a lively neighborhood coffee shop where you overhear the daily scoops from people. The general opinion about this news? Honestly nothing. Nobody even mentioned it from what I heard. A new train station being built nearby was a hotter topic. I definitely find it a depressing scene for the people there. I honestly have mixed thoughts. I want the terrorists eradicated. But I want Afghanistan way more peaceful. Neither was achieved. I don't think the Taliban are going to make it more peaceful. I just watched a video of people falling off the wheels of a military cargo jet, so I'm a bit sad at the moment. Profoundly sad at all this. I'm glad we're finally pulling out of that useless war. And no more soldiers will have to die there, but it's also disturbing what's going on there now. There's no way the Taliban could lead a government. But how many people have to suffer until something changes? The Taliban led the government from 1996 to 2001, aside from about 20% of the country. They seem to have the better politicians. No reason to think they can't run the government now. It feels very ready. Fire. Aim. It seems ill thought out and mostly unplanned. I'm not making a judgment call on the action itself because I think both sides can be argued well. But I think this was poorly executed. People say it was all a waste, and I tell them the war accomplished what it was intended to accomplish. It took the taxpayers' money and distributed throughout the American aristocracy, the unbear wealthy, the defense industry, politicians in the form of campaign contributions, and the entire corporate state got what it saw as their due. Even sending our children off to die. Thank God we are getting out. If, after more than 20 years of investing, 000 000 000 000 American 18 plus, and countless American lives nation building over there, the best they have is nothing at all, then we should not invest another single dollar or drop of blood. What a waste. Honestly, while I feel a little for the people caught in the middle, I don't really care what happens there. For decades the world hated us for being there. The locals hated us for being there. US citizens hated us for being there. So now we are getting out and everyone hates us for not being there. It is a shoothole country full of shoothole people who seem to want to force everyone to live like shoot. It's hard to care when their own military doesn't care and welcomes the Taliban shoothole lifestyle. They hated ex-Descendants because he spoke the truth. Much of the news we're receiving here in the States is media censored. You literally have to go to foreign news sites like India's English written one in order to see how much worse the Kabul airport situation is than the fall of Saigon. MSNBC or CNN aren't going to show you the chaos of people climbing onto those mobile airport corridors to get into a plane. Seriously insane images. You have to go to 4chan or other uncensored places for that. Likewise, they're not going to report on the teachers having to say goodbye to their female students since they won't be allowed in class anymore, or how parents of teenage girls 15 and up are having to quickly marry their daughters off to friendly neighborhood boys and men so they don't get assigned to a Taliban husband. Out of place. Out of mind. I'm at a loss for words and emotions. I feel so bad for the desperate Afghans that are trying to flee. I think of all the girls who will be taken as rape slaves by those Taliban. I think of the little boys who will be abused and made into fighters against their will. All I hope for is that nations step up to offer them refugee status to escape that hell. Afghanistan will be worse than Iran by all measures. And I feel it was infinitely cruel to cancel passenger flights to enable the US forces to evacuate. That's inhuman. The priority should have been evacuating any and all Afghans wanting to escape oppression. What should have happened, months before? Deals with any and all states to accept Afghan refugees. Then turn it over to the Taliban. But they weren't going to do that because all lives don't really matter to any human government. They should have allowed female public figures to flee as refugees before they handed Afghanistan to the Taliban on a platter. All women in government will be the first targeted. And it makes me sick. I'm sad for the women who thought they wouldn't live the life their mothers and grandmothers lived, who will now be forced back into it. I literally don't care. I have too much shoot to worry about already. You speak the truth. Long as they don't bring that shoot over here, I don't care. Yeah, I mean, When has stirring the Middle East hornet's nest ever come back to bite us? Hey, where do you think all those young men escaping from Afghanistan are gonna go to? Refugees. To your country. Very sad, but should be an eye-opener to those that complain about US just how good we have it here. The war should have never started to begin with. If you are going to leave, you've got to leave the right way. No diplomatic agreement of any sort was reached with the Taliban, even if it wasn't favorable to our world vision. Just something that at least prevents unnecessary bloodshed of Afghans at minimum. Grants some women's rights at best. No guarantees or timely visa processing for interpreters who helped save our military and are now being executed, etc. The only good thing is that we are leaving and ending a needless war. But we are not leaving the right way at all. I mean, not like we could expect the Taliban to hold their end of the agreement anyway. Also, some blame lies on Pakistan here as well for being our ally, harboring enemy and extender groups including the Taliban who took Afghanistan. It's depressing. But it's also a learning opportunity for us as a nation. If we get suckered into starting another military occupation in the next 10 years, there is no hope for us as a nation or as a people. Dude, we already learned this lesson in Vietnam. I have no faith in our leaders to have the wisdom to not repeat history, especially when defense contractors made $2 trillion off this war that the American people paid for. It's an awful situation. We shouldn't have gone there to begin with. And the fact that it took us 20 years to leave is awful in every sense of the word. The effect it will on the innocent people, the resources wasted, trillions spent, and what was the result? Nothing with long-term benefits whatsoever. We shouldn't have become involved when Russia was trying to take over. It's time America starting focusing on itself and stop pretending to be a world superpower. Yeah, I can just imagine putting closed for renovations on all the US borders. IDKY, that was funny to me. I'm sad and embarrassed. I wish I had the power to do something. I work with a guy who is retired from the Air Force and spent time there. He said the thing that made him want to go re-enlist was the sex slavery that has blown up there again since we left. Pretty much knew it was coming. We don't need any more of our soldiers or our allies dying for people who clearly won't even fight for their own country. Enough is enough. It's a sad and predictable outcome, but 20 years is a long time to occupy.